Have you ever noticed that the most powerful person in the room is usually the quiet one? They don't argue. They don't defend themselves. They just observe. And somehow, without saying a single word, everyone feels smaller. You can feel it in the air, that invisible pressure that makes people lower their voices, that tension that turns silence into dominance. We've been conditioned to believe that power comes from noise, from speeches, from charisma, from words that command attention. But real power doesn't shout. It doesn't beg to be heard. It waits, it watches. It lets others reveal themselves first. Because silence isn't weakness, it's control. It's the moment before the storm, the pause before the final move. It's the weapon of those who no longer need validation. Most people can't stand silence. They fill it with nervous laughter, meaningless chatter, excuses, anything to escape that unbearable stillness. But those who can master silence, they control the rhythm of every interaction. They dictate the emotional temperature of every room they walk into. And once you understand how this works, once you learn how silence shapes perception, bends psychology, and commands respect, you will never look at human interaction the same way again. This isn't just about communication. It's psychological warfare, the kind that doesn't need to scream to win. And very few ever master it. Before we dive in, I want you to stay until the end of this video, because once you understand the real mechanics of silence, you'll begin to see how power truly operates in your daily life, in relationships, in business, even within your own mind. If you're ready to awaken to that truth, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I release the next piece in this series on power and self-mastery. Now take a deep breath and prepare yourself, because from here on, every word and every pause matters. Picture this: you're in a meeting. The air is thick with tension. One person keeps talking, louder, faster, trying to dominate every second. They're explaining, defending, and overcompensating. And across the table sits another, silent, calm, unreadable. They make no effort to interrupt. They simply watch. Within minutes, the balance of power shifts. The one who speaks too much begins to sound nervous, desperate. The one who says nothing becomes magnetic. Everyone's eyes start to drift toward them, wondering what they're thinking, how they'll respond. What kind of power hides behind that quiet? Silence has already won the room. You've seen this happen, haven't you? In arguments, relationships, and friendships, the pattern repeats. The person who speaks first often loses control, while the one who holds their silence bends the moment to their will. It's not magic. It's psychology. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So when someone's silence unnerves you, it's not really them you're afraid of. It's the reflection of your own insecurity staring back at you. Because silence is a mirror, and most people can't stand to see their own reflection. When someone refuses to fill the void with words, they force you to confront what's inside that space. Your anxiety, your need for validation, your desperate hunger to be understood. In the modern world, we mistake noise for confidence. We think the louder voice is the stronger one. But the truth is the opposite. Noise is often panic disguised as certainty. Words can hide fear, insecurity, and confusion. Silence, on the other hand, exposes reality. It strips away illusions. It makes people reveal themselves, not because you've asked them to, but because they can't handle the weight of not being heard. Think about the last time you had a heated argument. The other person kept pushing, talking, trying to prove their point. And then, when you went silent, really silent, something changed, didn't it? They got angrier, louder, more defensive. Because your silence pulled their mask away. They weren't fighting you anymore. They were fighting the void within themselves. That's the essence of psychological power, the ability to remain still while others unravel in your presence. Silence destabilizes people because it denies them the feedback they crave. The human mind is addicted to response. It needs confirmation, reaction, attention. Without it, the brain begins to panic. That's why your calmness in conflict confuses manipulators, irritates narcissists, and terrifies those who rely on control. They can't read you. And what can't be read can't be controlled. Most people think silence is submission. They couldn't be more wrong. Silence is a form of dominance, not through aggression, but through composure. It's not the silence of fear. It's the silence of awareness. It's the decision to step outside the emotional chaos and observe it from above. And once you realize that you don't need to respond to everything, that you can choose when and how to use your voice, something inside you shifts. You begin to understand that real power isn't about having the last word. It's about knowing when no words are needed at all. So here's the uncomfortable truth. You've been playing power games your entire life. At work, in love, in friendships, without even realizing it. And most of the time, you've been losing. Because you were too busy trying to prove your worth through words. But power doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is. And the people who understand that, those who can sit in stillness, those who can make the world chase their silence, they are the ones who control the energy of every room they enter. So let me ask you this. Why does silence, something so simple, make us feel so powerless? Maybe because it reminds us of how fragile our sense of control truly is. Before we go deeper, I want you to reflect on your own experiences. When was the last time someone's silence unsettled you? Or when did your silence change the entire direction of a moment? Share it in the comments. Tell me your story. I read every one of them, and I'll respond personally to the ones that stand out. Now in the next part, we'll dive beneath the surface into the psychology and philosophy that explain why silence can dominate minds, disarm manipulation, and command respect without a single word. Are you ready to see what truly happens inside the mind when the noise stops? Silence is not emptiness. It is present condensed into its purest form. Most people fear it because they can't control it. They can't predict it, measure it, or manipulate it. But those who understand it, those who can use it, become something else entirely. They become unreadable. And in the world of power, to be unreadable is to be untouchable. Let's go deeper. 1. The psychology of silence, Jung and Freud. Carl Jung believed that silence is not an absence of sound, but a mirror, a psychic surface where projections come to die. When you stay silent, you stop feeding the illusion others build around you. You reflect their unconscious back to them. That's why people get anxious in silence, because what they see isn't you, it's themselves. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So when your calm unsettles someone, it is not your calm that disturbs them. It is their own chaos being mirrored back. Freud took this further. He observed that silence forces the unconscious to speak. In therapy, he would let his patients fill the space with their own voices, watching as their defenses collapsed. When confronted with silence, the human mind rushes to fill it, often revealing more than it ever intended to. That's the first rule of power. The one who can stay silent holds the frame. You control the tempo of the interaction. You decide when the music stops. 2. The power of silence. Nietzsche and Machiavelli. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who cannot control his tongue cannot control his destiny." In his philosophy, mastery of the self, the will to power, begins with mastery of expression. To control your speech is to control your reality. Because every time you speak impulsively, you hand a piece of your power to someone else. Words can be chains. They bind you to emotions, reactions, and promises that may not serve you. The truly powerful don't explain, they demonstrate. They let their presence say what their mouths never need to. Machiavelli understood this centuries before modern psychology confirmed it. In The Prince, he wrote that a wise ruler must know when to speak and when to remain silent, because every word reveals a strategy, every reaction exposes a weakness. In the game of power, silence is camouflage. It is misdirection. It keeps your opponent guessing while you move unseen. He also knew that those who talk too much often betray themselves. The more you explain, he might say, the less they believe you. The manipulator's greatest fear is unpredictability. And silence, true, deliberate silence, is the most unpredictable act of all. 3. Silence as a modern weapon. The new age of manipulation in today's world, silence is almost extinct. We live in a culture of noise, where everyone talks, posts, debates, and reacts. Every second, billions of voices compete for attention. And yet, in this storm of constant chatter, the quiet ones, the ones who choose when to speak, become mythic. They stand out precisely because they don't participate in the chaos. Modern psychology confirms what ancient philosophers already knew. Silence triggers discomfort. Studies show that when a person receives no verbal feedback in a conversation, their stress hormones spike. Cortisol and adrenaline flood the body. The brain interprets the lack of response as danger. And to regain equilibrium, it pushes the person to fill the void, to speak, confess, over-explain. This is why interrogators, negotiators, and even therapists use silence strategically. They know that in stillness, truth emerges. People rush to fill the gap, and in doing so, they expose their intentions, their fears, their weaknesses. In personal relationships, silence can unmask manipulation faster than confrontation ever could. When you stop defending yourself, the manipulator loses their grip. They rely on your reactions to maintain control. But when you go quiet, they panic. Because now the script has changed, and they don't know their lines anymore. And on social media, silence has become a symbol of authority. The loudest voices drown each other out, but the one who stays still, who only speaks when necessary, commands attention when they finally do. In a world of oversharing, restraint is revolutionary. So remember this: power doesn't need to scream. It only needs to be felt. The strong don't compete for attention. They create gravity. That's the secret behind the quiet confidence of leaders, thinkers, and creators who move entire worlds without raising their voices. They understand what most never will, that silence is not absence, it's presence, multiplied. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced the power of silence? When someone's stillness completely changed the energy of a room? Or when your own calm broke someone's control? Share your story in the comments. I read each one carefully, and I'll respond to the insights that hit deepest. In the next part, we'll bring this down to earth, with real tangible examples of how silence rewrites power dynamics in business, relationships, and conflict. Because theory is nothing without embodiment. Are you ready to see how it works in the real world? Silence isn't philosophy until it's lived. So let's bring it down from theory to what you see every day, in work, in love, in conflict. Because once you recognize it, you'll realize, in every arena of life, the one who can hold silence the longest controls the outcome. In business and leadership, picture a negotiation. One person talks endlessly, throwing numbers, trying to sound confident. The other just listens, steady eyes, still posture, not a single wasted word. Within minutes, the balance shifts. The talker starts to explain too much, filling the silence with concessions. The quiet one simply waits. It feels unfair, but it's not. It's psychology. The human brain cannot tolerate unbroken silence. It rushes to relieve it. And that's when truth and weakness spill out. Seasoned negotiators know this. They call it the tactical pause. They understand that whoever can hold silence longer wins, not through intimidation, but through presence. The best leaders are the same. They speak less, observe more. When they finally talk, every word carries weight because it's been distilled through restraint. Their silence creates anticipation. People lean in because the mind naturally values what is rare. In relationships and emotional dynamics, silence becomes something even deeper. Think of the last argument you had. Someone raised their voice, demanded answers, pushed harder, and you went quiet. The silence thickened the air, didn't it? Suddenly, they began to unravel, their confidence dissolving into anger or guilt. That's because emotional manipulators feed on reaction. They rely on your need to explain yourself. When you go silent, their game collapses. Carl Jung called this the death of projection. When you no longer defend the illusion they've placed on you, they are forced to face their own shadow. But this kind of silence isn't coldness. It's sovereignty. It says, I don't need to fight to prove what's already true. It's not retreat. It's return, back to your own center, your own peace. Silence in love isn't about punishment. It's about clarity. When words have lost meaning, silence tests authenticity. If a relationship can't survive your quiet, it's built on noise, not depth. In conflict, now imagine confrontation, a meeting, a disagreement, a heated debate. One person yells, gesturing wildly, trying to dominate through volume. The other stands still, breathing slowly, saying nothing. The silence grows. And suddenly, the loud one looks small. We mistake loudness for strength, but silence exposes fragility. A person who cannot sit in stillness without losing control has no mastery of self. Nietzsche warned, "He who cannot command himself will always obey others." That's what silence proves, command, not over others, but over the storm within. Because silence is not the absence of power, it's its highest proof. The social mirror in our noisy, performative world, silence has become rebellion. Everyone's performing, posting, debating, explaining. But when you resist the urge to react, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is magnetic. Online, the ones who don't speak often, who share less but with precision, are the ones we remember. The algorithm rewards outrage, but the human psyche craves composure. Silence, in a sea of noise, becomes elegance. When you start living this way, something profound happens. People adjust their tempo to yours. They lower their voices, pause before they speak, and become gentler in your presence. That isn't manipulation. That's gravity. The power of the pause, true silence, isn't just the absence of words. It's control between them. The pause before you respond, the breath before you answer, that's where mastery lives. Most people react instantly, driven by emotion. But those who wait, who breathe, who choose, command the rhythm of interaction. The one who sets the rhythm sets the outcome. Silence, then, isn't passive. It's choreography. It turns conversations into strategy, conflict into art. When you finally speak after silence, your words land differently. They cut through noise because they've earned their place. Reflection, so ask yourself, when was the last time your silence changed the direction of a moment? Was it in an argument, a meeting, or a goodbye you didn't answer? Maybe you've already felt it. That shift when you stop explaining and the world suddenly starts listening. Share your story in the comments. Tell me where silence gave you back your power. I read them all, and I respond to those that speak from the heart. Because next, we're going even deeper, from using silence against the world to mastering it within yourself, to learn how stillness stops being a weapon and becomes wisdom. Silence is power, but not in the way most people think. Used without awareness, it becomes a weapon, sharp, punishing, designed to wound. But in its highest form, silence is not manipulation. It is mastery. Real silence is not about controlling others. It's about no longer needing to. Because when you no longer depend on reaction, you step into something larger, sovereignty over your own energy. The energy of restraint. Carl Jung said that every person has a limited reservoir of psychic energy. We waste it constantly, in arguments, in over-explaining, in defending things that don't need defense. When you go silent, you are not retreating, you are conserving. Every word you don't speak is energy you keep. And that energy becomes clarity, presence, awareness. Silence, then, isn't the act of avoiding conflict. It's the decision to rise above it. It's saying without words, I choose my peace over your chaos. That choice is not weakness, it's control. Because when you stop reacting, you force the world to adjust to your rhythm. Seeing through the noise. Freud once observed that when a patient was met with silence, their unconscious began to reveal itself. The same is true in life. When you stop filling every gap with words, truth starts to emerge in others and in yourself. Silence sharpens perception. You start noticing the tremor in someone's voice, the hesitation before they speak, the way energy shifts when truth brushes the air. What noise hides, silence uncovers. And that awareness, that ability to see clearly without reacting, is what makes you unshakable. Emotional sovereignty silence is not distance. It's discipline. It's the refusal to let emotion drag you where you don't want to go. You stop being pulled into every storm, every argument, every trap. In that quiet, you realize something powerful. You don't have to explain yourself to be understood. You don't have to fight to be respected. You only have to remain grounded in what you know to be true. This is the silence that liberates. Not the one that punishes, but the one that protects. And when you reach that level of control, you stop using silence as defense. It becomes your natural state. You don't withdraw from people. You withdraw from the need to please them. That's emotional freedom. The practice of conscious silence. How do you use silence without turning it into manipulation? By shifting intention. You don't stay silent to make others uncomfortable. You stay silent to listen, deeply, without resistance. When someone attacks or provokes you, pause before responding. Notice what arises inside you. The urge to react, to justify, to be seen as right. Then breathe. That small space between impulse and action is the birth of power. It's in that pause that you become aware. You see not only what's happening outside, but what's moving inside. And awareness always wins over reaction. Balance and presence. Silence can heal, but only if it's anchored in compassion. Used to punish, it creates walls. Used to understand, it builds bridges. The difference lies in intention. When your silence comes from pride, it isolates. When it comes from peace, it transforms. Nietzsche said, "He who masters himself, masters the world." That mastery begins with silence, the kind that listens without fear, that observes without judgment, that waits without needing to win. In that space, your words regain power. When you finally speak, people listen, not because you demanded attention, but because your quiet earned it. From weapon to wisdom. At first, silence feels like a shield. Then it becomes a mirror. And finally, it turns into a teacher. It teaches patience. It teaches presence. It teaches you that the most powerful response is often none at all. Because silence doesn't just change conversations, it changes you. It transforms the inner battlefield into peace. It frees you from the addiction to reaction, from the need to prove, from the noise of the world. So use silence not to dominate, but to discover. Not to withdraw, but to understand. Let it be your pause between thought and truth. Because when silence is guided by awareness, it's not manipulation. It's freedom. Tell me, when have you used silence to protect your peace, to understand someone deeper, or to master your emotions? Share your story in the comments. I read them all, and your reflections often inspire the next video. Now stay with me, because in the final part, we'll bring everything together. You'll see how silence, once mastered, becomes not just power, but presence itself. You've been taught your whole life to speak, to defend, to prove your worth through words. But true power was never in words, it was in the presence. Silence is the final form of strength. It doesn't rush to explain. It doesn't fight to be understood. It simply is. Think about it, even lions hunt in silence. The ocean, vast and unstoppable, makes no noise until it chooses to crash. The universe itself expands in complete stillness. Power has always been quiet. When you stop reacting, something begins to shift. The world slows down. People who once controlled you with emotion begin to lose their grip. You realize that not every attack deserves your attention. Not every insult requires an answer. Not every moment needs a sound. Because the moment you stop explaining yourself, the world starts to listen. And not just to your voice, but to your presence. Carl Jung once wrote that, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Silence is how you meet the unconscious. It's how you bring what's hidden into light, not through argument, but through awareness. When you stand in silence, you face yourself without distraction. You see your fears, your ego, your desires, and you stop being ruled by them. That's what makes silence terrifying for most people. It reveals the truth. But for those who can face it, that truth becomes liberation. Silence is not passive. It's creative. It builds something inside you that no external noise can touch. A core of calm that can't be shaken. That calm is what people mistake for mystery, for strength, for power. But it's not a mystery, it's mastery. And once you experience it, you begin to move differently. You stop chasing validation. You speak less, but mean more. You walk into rooms without demanding attention, and yet everything shifts around you. Because energy doesn't lie. And silence, when owned completely, radiates authority louder than words ever could. That's the paradox. You win not by fighting louder, but by needing nothing from the fight. You win the moment you no longer seek to win. Because power isn't about control over others, it's the absence of being controlled. So let your silence speak. Let it protect your peace, reveal your truth, and draw others toward the stillness they fear to face. Because the quietest presence often carries the heaviest weight. And one day, when the noise of the world fades and your mind finally settles, you'll realize something profound. The people who changed history weren't the loudest. They were the most certain. And certainty doesn't shout, it breathes. Silence is the language of those who have already won. If this message resonated with you, if you felt something awaken in you as you listened, then don't let it end here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next journey into philosophy, psychology, and self-mastery. And tell me in the comments, which idea from this video hit you the hardest? What truth about silence changed the way you see power, control, or yourself? I read every word, and your reflections often shape the next story I tell. Until then, stay aware, stay grounded, and when the world gets loud, remember, your silence is still your strongest voice.